Guys, or you say, yeah, well, we call it a geezer. Is that the same? No, it's same in Britain, but it's different in North America.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's been one of the disturbing trends I've seen. A couple of pastors recently who've been at courts is to see how they model their ministry around the politicians. So you have now pastors need to be ushered in at the church where you have security guards on both sides. So people seem to take what they see among the politicians and they basically mirror their ministries around that. And also, I think the theology as well has been very disturbing. So some will talk about you cannot talk to people about a powerful God or a rich God, but you don't show your congregation that power or the riches of God. So this, it tends to be phrased around the phrases like, the man of God, or as if he has exclusive line of access to God that no one else has. And I think for me, we need to go back to the biblical principle of how we understand the roles of the leaders, particularly Corinthians 1 to 4, which seems to go counter that, where the gospeler is the one who comes in weakness rather than in power. And the message you proclaim is a message that the world does not necessarily want to hear. Some consider it foolish, but we preach Christ crucified. So I think pastors need to reevaluate whom they model their ministries around. And I think if we go to the scriptures and look at the example of Christ and his disciples and how they conducted themselves in their leadership and ministries, and I think that could actually help us within the South African context.
It's helpful, I think, to remember what Jesus says in Matthew 20 to 28, when James and John and their mother approached Jesus with the request that the two sons could sit at Christ's left hand and right hand in the kingdom. And clearly she is thinking of an earthly kingdom, and to sit on the left hand and the right hand would make them the senior ministers of state, maybe the minister of defense, wanting the place of power, of access to the big man, thinking of Jesus as the big man. And he says, you don't know what you're asking. He says, can you drink the cup that I'm drinking? That is, can you suffer the way I suffer? And they're completely ignorant, and they say, yeah, we can. And he responds with a kind of twinkle in his eye, a kind of smile, and he says, well, there is a sense in which you can drink of my cup. After all, one of them is going to end up the first apostolic martyr. They'll suffer. And the other one's going to end up in exile in Patmos in his old age. But he says, it's not for me to give you those two gifts sitting on the left or the right, but up to my Father who is in heaven. And the other 10 apostles are indignant with the brothers, not because they think that the brothers have done something wrong, but because they didn't get their dibs in first. They all want the treasure posts. And that's when Jesus ties his understanding of Christian leadership to the cross. He says, the kings of this world rule over one another, and the governors and the leaders gloat over you. They control you. And what he means in the context is they soon get into a position where they feel entitled. They nominally are serving you, but in fact they're not serving you, they're serving themselves. They love the power. The power has hooked them. But he says, it shall not be so with you, but rather amongst my disciples, he says, whoever wants to serve whoever wants to be served must himself serve. Whoever wants to be in charge must become the slave of all. Just as, he says, the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many. So the cross is for us not only the basis of our salvation, the ground of the forgiveness of our sin, it's also the model of what leadership looks like. Leadership looks like going to the cross. That is to say, we seek so sincerely, so continuously, so unreservedly the good of others that we sacrifice anything ourselves for their good. It doesn't mean that there's no real leadership. When we speak of servant leadership, we don't abandon leadership, But it does mean that our leadership is not motivated by the desire for power, the desire to be number one, to be elevated, to become pompous. It's motivated by a desire to seek and to save those that are lost. It is a desire to seek the other's good in spiritual growth and thus to follow Jesus on his way to the cross.